Welcome to Connie Martinson Talks Books. If you have to give a speech this year, have I got a book for you, because it will allow you to both enrich yourself and have a terrific quote for your audience. The book is called The Word, Jewish Wisdom Through Time, a spiritual source book. So you don't really have to be Jewish to really get something out of this book, but if you are, it'll help from a spiritual sense to go deeper in yourself. The book is written by my guest, Noah BenShea. It's published by Villard, and we'll be back after a short pause.
According to television research, viewers like you are attracted to babies, puppies, and the word free, which is why we're using them to draw your attention to the federal government's free Consumer Information Catalog from, where else, Pueblo, Colorado. The catalog lists free and low-cost government publications on saving money, finding a job, educating your children, buying a home, getting federal benefits, staying healthy. Sorry, I thought I was losing you there for a second. Now, where were we? Best of all, the Consumer Information Catalog is free, and so are many of the publications listed inside. To get your free Consumer Information Catalog, send your name and address to Catalog, Pueblo, Colorado, 81009. That address again, Catalog, Pueblo, Colorado, 81009.
We're talking with Noah BenShea, author of The Word, Jewish Wisdom Through Time, a spiritual source book published by Villard. Welcome, Noah.
Thanks, Connie. It's nice to be back.
You know, I say author, but really you are selector, collector, reader, and final judge.
This has been an affair of the heart for me as much as the mind.
The book is divided into subjects. Then there are the quotes, and they can be from like 4 lines to 2 lines to a paragraph. And it's through the ages of Jewish what
I try to do here is I took all of information and divided it by a series of what we might call macro subjects. So it's God, God and people, self, self and others, man and woman. And then on each of these subjects I put a series of micro issues. So under man and woman there would be love, marriage, children, parenting. Under health there would be psychological health, there would be astrological. And you could look up in each of these subjects. There is 500 sources coming from either traditional scriptural works, Bible, Talmud, Midrash Rabbah, Zohar, Shulchan Aruch, from traditional Jewish scholars, which would be Maimonides, Rashi, from great scholars who are Jewish, which would be like Disraeli, if you will, Heine, Proust, from Jewish witticisms over time, and from the common person. All of that then allows you to see these characters. There's over 500 sources, over 3,000 entries, and then there are 3 sub-indexes so that each of the sources that you see quoted, you have a bio-index so you can look up something about that person, when they lived, what they did. Then there's another index which is a chronomap, which lets you see what else was going on in the world, so that when you see, the first temple is destroyed in 600 BC, what else was going on at that time? The Buddha was being born in India, Confucius was born in China, and then there's an applied bibliography so you can read more about any of these subjects. So it's a book that is layered and allows you to go as deep and as far with the subject as you would like.
Listen, I should say, because there was a little bit of humor as I read it when I see Noah BenShea quotes himself, but that was really from
work of my own. I try to. I'm a member of. I'm somebody who spent a lifetime doing this work and some of these thoughts myself, and I gave my editors at Random House full right, as if they needed it, to blue pencil me out whenever they thought, and they thought that it was appropriate for Noah BenShea to be included among some of the people that are in here. This is quotes that range, you have to understand, from Justin the High Priest to Bette Midler. So this is a pretty broad range, played heavily toward really the scholarship end.
Now, during your lifetime, you couldn't have read all of these books, but what did you do? As you were going through, you would look up subject matter?
This has been an area of focus for me for 30 years now, and I took this project about 5 years ago at the behest of my paperback publisher, Ballantine, who thought that I'd have a particular capacity. In fact, I have read almost all of these books in some level. I would be hesitant to say that I had mastered them, but this reflects a lifetime of research and area. When I had come across a line or a thought over time that struck me, I have written it down. I'm a person with an affection for language, and it's been very important. What I try to do here is allow the reader to see how an idea from 3,000 years ago sits next to an idea from 1,200 years ago, next to an idea from 600 years ago, next to a Nobel Prize winner from 60 years ago. It allows you to see how ideas mature, how they argue with themselves. The Talmud says there are 7 times 7 ways to argue every position. I wanted people to be able to see that and to see ideas in point, counterpoint, if you will.
There's a wonderful quote by a man whom I really adored, Louis Neisser, who has since died. But his quote about a woman being, a beautiful woman is one thing when she's young, but real beauty is what the woman has done with her life when she is an older woman.
I think that you know, it's strange that to lean back in this is not a quote from Judaism, but to a quote back from Picasso, who, when he did a painting of Gertrude Stein, she says, "It doesn't look like me," and he said, "Don't worry, you will."
Yeah, you know? I love that. I remember
I think
reading
that is the challenge in life, what we do with our inner beauty over time.
To be old is a glorious thing when one has not unlearned what it means to begin. Now that's part from Martin Buber, yes, which is all part of when you say comparing thoughts within a subject matter through the generations.
This, you know, and it's curious for me, that particular quote was connected to me by Ram Dass, Dr. Richard Alpert, who had been with Timothy Leary at Harvard in the 60s, and Ram Dass and I have been friends for a while. He's one of the people, I'm pleased with the people who I've acknowledged at the front of the book. They are allies and friends and teachers, and it's a joy to see how, you know, if what we are is dirt, is the soil, short of the breath of God, then all of us are one, and we exhale, we are all sharing a breath. So to have Buber shared to me by Ram Dass seems only apropos of the word.
And there's the chapter on Israel, Zionism, Jews, converts, anti-Semitism, and the Holocaust. That's quite a package in one chapter.
Well, it is like a major. There are subsections in there that I try to deal with, and I just thought that there were a number of issues that needed to be dealt with. If you asked most, what I try to do in this book is not give you the long-winded answers of a philosopher telling what you ought to think about what so-and-so said. I wanted to give it to you in the words of the mind themselves. That is, if you will, Thomas Lowell once called translations kissing the bride through the veil. I wanted to remove the veil and allow you to have the intimacy with these minds. I felt oftentimes, because this was a project which was both more laborious and richer than I had any consciousness when I took the task on. It was about 5 years in the putting together of this. I felt I was a recording secretary and a minion for the dead, that I would be bringing to life voices that had passed, that people had forgotten. One of the moments, there was a woman in the 15th century who saw the world slipping away, saw it changing in a particular way, and wanted to write stories so her children would know the world before it was lost to them. How parallel is that among the lives of a lot of other mothers and women today who see that world slipping that their children will never know?
No, you covered to death because, just as I said to you, I'd been a dear friend, Marilyn Duff, died, and I was at her funeral, and it was a Roman Catholic funeral, and he talked in terms of there are 3 stages in one's life: birth, the world we see, and the hereafter. Do Jews believe in the hereafter, as you put?
Well, that's a really interesting question. One of the things I want to deal with is if you ask most Jews what is, or if you ask Christians, because this book is written as much for the broader population as it is for the Jewish population, it just has the integrity for Jews who are conscious and well-read at the same time. If you ask most Jews what the notion of heaven is, they would have, well, because Judaism is very much about the business of one conducts himself in the way now, not for what it'll bring you in the world after. That is, one does not conduct himself ethically because of what it'll bring you. In fact, you're forbidden from doing. You're supposed to conduct yourself ethically because that brings heaven to earth rather than worrying about how one will attain heaven after earth. The Jewish notion of heaven is extremely articulated, and the consciousness behind it is, to borrow from another vernacular, all God's children got wings. right? In heaven, there's room for everyone. Jews have a particular responsibility in this lifetime for how they are to conduct themselves if they are to gain entrance to Gan Eden, the world to come. Olam Haba, they call it, the world to come. So I think that there's a pronounced notion of heaven in Judaism, but it is not an experience which will leave us short of our neighbors and our friends and the people we love. What's left to us is how we conduct ourselves in the present tense.
You quote another brilliant man whom I had the good fortune to know as a child, Rabbi Joshua Loth Liebman, who wrote a brilliant book, which I hope it's still in print. I had to go to an out-of-print place to get a copy for a friend, called Peace of Mind. Would you read what you have for him, which is on page 312?
I'd be pleased to.
As I said to you, this was also, I'm in the funereal mood, but this was read at my father's funeral, and it was a help.
For each one of us, the moment comes when the great nurse, death, takes man, the child, by the hand and quietly says, "It is time to go home. Night is coming. It is our bedtime, child, child of earth. Come, you're tired. Lie down at last in the quiet nursery of nature and sleep. Sleep well. The day is gone. Stars shine in the canopy of eternity."
Beautiful. It is so beautiful. You know, as you're reading it, I can almost still see this marvelous man I knew as a child. Both marvelous men, my father as well as Dr. Liebman. Do you have a special one that you...
I do. There's a few quotes here that really have had a pronounced impact on my life. One of them because it strikes me that we tend not to realize. One of the things that really came out for me in this book was that these were not only written by great minds, but by great spirits who lend us their spirit as much as their mind. For example, Rashi, which most people think is the great Talmudist of the 11th century in the south of France, people don't tend to realize, it is in here, that he wrote at the time of the First Crusades, when there was such mass destruction. He said, "After my generation, there will be no one left to say Kaddish," the Hebrew prayer for the dead. One of the great souls that we quote several times in here is Albert Einstein. Now, Einstein, people tend to allow Einstein as the greatest scientific mind of our century, if not of many centuries. One of the quotes of Einstein's that I've just grown so close to and have seen over and over is, "Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous." It's such a wonderful quote, because when I was younger, I would look at events and say, what a coincidence. As I've gotten older, I tend to bear more witness and more patient with my witness and say, coincidence, that is God's way of remaining. And there's another quote from Marcel Proust I will just share with you. And it's a wonderful quote. The French philosopher writes, "All of our final decisions are made in states of mind which do not last." And then there's one I'll just share with you. I can go on. I'm like a guy with a candy box. I have this notion that all of us, as we grow older, find ourselves with what I call going away presents. Those are the things we get from our parents that we inherit without knowing we've gotten them. We wake up and find ourselves mimicking our mother and father at middle age without knowing we've got them. So there's a quote, and we get them from both parents. It's a quote from Jules Pfeiffer, the cartoonist, and I'm paraphrasing, pretty close on here. He says, "I inherited my father's walk, my father's style, my father's sense of humor, and my mother's intense dislike for my father."
Can we just mention about the baker?
Well, it's my joy. Jacob the Baker and Jacob's Journey have become both national and international bestsellers. They continue to sell more and more copies every year. They've been translated into, they were on the Korean bestseller list for about 6 months, sold several 100,000 copies. They've been German, Italian, French, Norwegian, Dutch, Spanish, and they've now both been sold to China. For me, I think I had the wit to write Jacob the Baker and Jacob's Journey when I was younger. I think what makes Jacob, and I hope what rings through the word, is a sense of compassion. The Talmud says the highest wisdom is kindness, and it is a kindness of compassion, not chesed, but rachamon, of compassion in Hebrew. So I'd like to bring that to this work.
Thank you, Noah. You certainly have. Will you autograph my book? And we'll be back after a short pause.